Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, I am not Chair Giordano. My name is Shirley Oben. I would like to call this meeting to order. As a reminder, please note this audit committee meeting is being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend this meeting. Ada, can you please call roll call?
Yes. Tony Giordano is not here yet. Frank Cirabella.
Present.
Corinne Apollon. Alice Ho.
Present.
Marjorie Dinstad.
Present.
Shirley Oben.
Present.
Kevin Troy.
Present.
Sarita Scott. Manning Tavares. Naveed Hassan.
Okay, thank you, Ada. We have quorum. Nothing. Noting of the minutes of the meeting of audit committee held on September 10th, 2024. The first order of business is agenda item number 2, noting of the minutes of the audit committee BERS held on September 10th, 2024. The minutes have been previously provided to the committee via the SharePoint site. May I have a motion to consider the minutes from September 10th committee meeting?
Motion.
Okay, a second? Yeah. Please raise your hand if you vote to approve the minutes. Please raise your hand if you do not approve the minutes. Do we have any abstentions at this time? Okay, so our September 10th, 2024 minutes are approved. So we're gonna go into the executive director's update. Next item on the agenda is number 3. And Mr. Rich Sanford is.
Yeah, I've got
Okay,
that's my
good.
first name. Just call me Sandy, but
I was
I have no comments because you're gonna hear all my comments later at the board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Sandy.
It's repetitive.
No problem. Thank you so much. So our next item on the agenda is item number 4, is the internal audits director's update. Ms. Ezefiel, you're gonna share your presentation.
Yes.
You're Ada.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. So just a quick rundown of the agenda for us today. I'm going to go over audits completed since the last audit committee meeting, give you an update on audits that are currently ongoing, give you an update on findings from prior audits. We usually call that the follow-ups. And then I will touch on the last risk assessment and internal audit plan. All right, so the first audit here today is the debt benefits audit. So this was an audit that we conducted late last year. Our objectives for this audit were to determine whether debt benefits were paid accurately and in a timely manner and in accordance with plan provisions and laws that apply. And then we also wanted to assess the effectiveness of internal controls around the debt benefits process. For our scope, we looked at transactions that occurred. So all payments that were made between January of 2022 and December of 2023. So we looked at a 2-year period, and we looked at the pre-retirement debt benefits, post-retirement debt benefits, and TDA debt benefits. For this audit, we have a few findings listed here. 2 of them are rated high and the other 3 were rated medium risk. And going into the first finding, it pertains to Chapter 716 of the laws of 2023. So Chapter 716 amends the pre-retirement and post-retirement ordinary debt benefits for certain members. And the amendment is that it lowers the age-based reduction applied to those debt benefits, thereby increasing benefits that beneficiaries were eligible to receive. But the law was retroactive to June 30th of 2021. And so all debt benefits that were impacted were subject to review and revision if necessary. The Office of the Actuary will usually certify all the debt benefits. And so they provided BERS with a list of 29 retirees that not retirees, of active members who died in active service that would be entitled to revisions or what we call recalculations. And so we tested those, and then we also had our sample of pre and post-retirement debt benefits that we tested. So of the 29 members that the actuary's office provided, we found that 27 of them had not yet been recalculated. And from our sample, we found that 15% were entitled to a recalculation based on Chapter 716. Now, those recalculations will be processed in the system, but the system wasn't set up yet to handle those recalculations. So that was one of the reasons why there was a delay. The system was finally set up in June. And at the time that we were reporting this audit, the team had started the process of doing those recalculations, and they were doing about 1 every month. And their plan was to up that to about 5 every month. Let's see here. So we made the recommendation, obviously, that they prioritize this for processing because the beneficiaries would be out the monies that they were entitled because they were still getting the old benefits. So management did agree with the findings. They gave us a very comprehensive action plan, actually. And some of the things they plan on doing will include identifying and resolving any outstanding bugs with CPMS, because even though the system has been set up to allow them to process based on Chapter 716, there were still some kinks that needed to be worked out. So they're prioritizing that. They're going to identify the retirees and active debt benefits that need recalculation. And their target is, like I said, to go up to processing those, about 5 of those every month. They also have a plan to monitor their progress and provide training as needed for the staff. And their target date for this is June of 2025. Second finding has to do with a lack of segregation of duties. So the SOPM, or Standard Operating Procedures Manuals, requires an individual that is separate from the individual who's verifying to do the processing. So there should be at least 2 individuals involved in processing any debt benefit. So during our audit, we tested for that to ensure that those controls were in place and not being bypassed. What we did find, however, was that in about 49% of the samples that we tested, that control was being bypassed. And we raised that up to management and recommended that they implement stricter controls. So management did let us know that they have controls built into CPMS, but the exception is that it allows the supervisor to bypass that control and process a debt benefit payment single-handedly. So management's decision now is to enforce that hierarchy. They did mention that there were staffing shortages and that they allowed the supervisor to do that processing, but we, let them know they had to enforce those controls. So they're going forward, they're going to ensure that those roles and responsibilities are separate and clear and followed. They are also going to develop more staff to take on verifier roles to, mitigate that gap. And then they're also going to train up an individual to become an assistant to the supervisor to provide that support in the supervisor's absence. They will also provide training as needed and monitor their compliance and the effectiveness of the new processes they'll put in place. So the target date for rectifying this would be June of 2025, which is just a couple of months. So finding number 3, we rated this one medium risk, and it had to do with the forms that were submitted. So the forms and documents. The process for debt benefits involves the beneficiaries filing certain forms and certain required supporting documents like their ID, a form that's properly signed and notarized, providing accurate addresses, social security numbers, and things like that. So during our audit, we tested for that because the SOPM requires that the forms be properly completed in order for it to be accepted and processed. So we did find that around 33% of claimant statements, which is the basic form every beneficiary would file, and then EFT forms. So when the beneficiaries are requesting that their funds be electronically deposited to their accounts, they're required to complete those forms as well. 42% of those were not properly completed. However, they were accepted and processed. So some of the issues that we found with those forms were incorrect date of death, incorrect addresses, incorrect date of birth, incorrect social security number, and sometimes incorrect account information. We also found instances where the notary's stamp or seal was not provided. So we raised all this up to management and we recommended that they improve their form review procedures and also provide guidelines for these beneficiaries, because we do understand that the forms can be somewhat intimidating for some beneficiaries to fill out. So we recommended that they included a guide with the application that will guide the beneficiaries on what fields are required and what documents are required. So management did agree with us also, and they gave us a comprehensive action plan as well. They are going to review the form procedures, by which they review those applications, and they will ensure that going forward, the forms are accurate and complete before they're processed. They also will update the applications to include guidelines and also add a sample of what the completed form should look like for the beneficiaries. And then they're going to train the staff as needed, implement their process monitoring, and take actions on any inconsistencies that they identify with forms. Target date for this is also June of this year. Finding number 4 had to do with delays in several things. So delays in receiving the documents from the beneficiaries, delays in processing those payments, and delays in sending out packets to the beneficiaries. So what usually will happen is when we're informed of a member's passing, the team is required to contact the beneficiaries and give them the forms that they need. And when they contact the beneficiary, they will confirm that they are beneficiaries, collect their contact information, and note that in the system. So what we observed here was that there was a delay in debt notifications coming in, and some notifications were received between 6 months and 6 years after the members passed. And this was due to, it indicated for us a lack of proactive procedures to identify deceased retirees. And this is particularly important for those cases where the beneficiaries are unaware that their death benefits due to them. We also found that beneficiaries submitted the required forms late, between 4 months to over 6 years after the initial packet was sent to them or a correction was requested for them. And we found 2 instances where benefits were, the required forms and documents were never submitted, and there was no evidence that those beneficiaries were followed up with. And then lastly, we noted that payments were disbursed between 66 to 193 days after claimant statements and all the required documents were submitted. And the industry standard for processing payments like this is usually around 60 days. So this was kind of outside that expectation. We did note that those delays were due to lateness on the part of the beneficiaries themselves, or on our part or the team's part as it relates to their reviews of those documents that came in. So what we recommended here was that, so the team has implemented procedures for actively identifying deceased retirees. So we recommended that they extend those procedures to active death benefit cases so that they can identify those timely as well. And then we also recommended that they strengthen their follow-up procedures. They're required to follow up, but that wasn't actively being done. So we recommended that they do that. We also recommended that they streamline their internal reviews, because in some cases it did take an extended period for those reviews to be completed. And then lastly, we recommended that they update their SOPM so that they set clear expectations for themselves as a team when it comes to the timelines for processing, for follow-up, and for contacting the beneficiaries. So management agreed with us and they again gave us a comprehensive plan. So they're going to extend their annual or semi-annual death match to active death benefit cases as well as the retirees. They're also going to develop a follow-up protocol to follow up with beneficiaries that don't respond. They will also review their internal processes and establish stricter timelines to ensure that forms are processed within 60 days of receipt. And then they are also going to update their SOPM to include timelines that they will set. And then they're going to monitor their actions and report on that. Do you have a question? So the last finding for this audit is finding number 5. And this had to do with improper generation and dispatch of letters to beneficiaries. So what usually happens is that when the beneficiary is confirmed, a package will be dispatched to them. And the requirement is that those are dispatched within 5 to 10 business days after recording that notification. And then when it's confirmed, they also will send a letter requesting the documents that are needed in support of the payment. And that letter is usually signed by the Director of Operations. So we tested that process as part of the audit. And in about 51 of cases that we looked at, so just over half, the package letters sent to beneficiaries were not available, so we weren't able to review those. And some of the ones that we were able to review did have inaccurate information like beneficiary names or mailing address or both. 45% of those letters did not include the signature of the Director of Operations. I believe that's a system issue that they are looking at, but we'll get into that further. And then we noted that all package letters that were sent out included an option that should not have been included. So beneficiaries have the option, if they're taking a TDA death benefit, they have the option to transfer those funds into a variable account that remains with BERS, and that option is only available to beneficiaries. However, the letters that were generated for everyone, including beneficiaries and estates, also included that option. So we raised that to management and they will be removing that going forward. And then lastly, we noted that for all our samples, even though those disbursement letters were generated, so the letter would usually indicate to whom the payment is going, how much the payment is, how much is taxable, taxes withheld, and things like that. So those letters were generated, but they were never sent to the beneficiaries and they were never sent to banks for rollovers. So we raised all of this to management and we made recommendations to rectify all of those issues. And they did agree with the findings and the recommendations. And they gave us, again, an action plan that includes all the mitigation strategies. So they're going to review record keeping of beneficiaries to make sure that the information that they have is accurate. They're going to make sure that beneficiary information is verified for each case that's being processed. They're also going to review the letters to make sure that the information contained on those letters are accurate. And then they're going to review and revise the disbursement letter that goes out to make sure that those rollover options are not included for estates and other entities that are not eligible to take part in that transfer. And then they're going to make sure that that the letters are actually mailed to the beneficiaries and to the financial institutions. Target date for this is June of next year, so June of 2026. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions regarding this.
Can I ask, so if the disbursement letters were not dispatched,
Yes.
kind of curious, and this is just for that time frame. Since that time frame, I don't know how many deaths have occurred since then. Do we assume that those also have not been dispatched? I don't know how many deaths there have been since then. Can we assume that?
Yes.
So when we say we're taking measures to rectify that, we're saying from that point forward, right? We're not just talking about that grouping. What would be the legal ramifications of not getting this in, and what is a timely manner in these operation?
There really are no legal repercussions. But we will get, I mean, a DFS audit would target this area
Okay.
in all likelihood, because it's a target for insurance companies.
Yeah.
Proactively identifying death benefit beneficiaries and notifying them. And this is something that operations has been working on for a number of years. We had a significant challenge with the identification of
The beneficiary.
notices.
Death notice.
Not death notice.
Death notice.
The data which used to come from Social Security has not been available for over 10 years. We are now using LexisNexis. When did that procurement end? A day? Was that early last year?
Started using LexisNexis in March
March?
of 2024.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
It's been a year. Yeah, it's been a year. But that was a challenge, actually getting a data source to identify deaths. Correct. Started. Shirley's running the meeting.
Oh, great. Good. Oh, good. You get my email?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. Been out here for like
Okay.
45 minutes.
Shirley's standing in for the chair. He's later than you, so you're on time.
Are we actually running the meeting?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. That's me now.
So investments or any money that is supposed to be allocated to these individuals, are they still earning an additional interest, or is that money that's invested?
No,
What
it's
is it
the
kind of-
the benefit is defined as a percentage of their income. Multiple, sorry, not percentage.
So beneficiaries don't get interest, only
Yeah.
living members. So interest will cease at the month prior to the date of death for the member.
If the date of death
So
is
yes,
correct.
the amount is.
On time for the 4 previous.
Shirley covered for you. You're okay. Good. You're good. Shirley covered. Relax, don't move.
Like a crazy person.
No, who are you?
No, this is your packet.
So in terms of a stress test, do you find that this is a good window of time to look at possible deaths because it was right after COVID? Would you say this is an average? Would you say this is above average?
Actually, it's hard for us to tell, to be honest. The best person to ask that question of would be Merrick.
Message from
They do a deaths, they do an independent death study. I think that the last time I saw him report on this, they said deaths shifted because of COVID, but there wasn't a significant, if
Well, I'd
you
like
looked
to
over
focus on the stress.
like a period of 5 or 6 years,
Send you like
it just
8 emails
shifted
on it.
deaths, you know,
Okay,
someone who would have died at 92 died at 88,
right.
you know.
You're gonna
The Mopi says.
A lot of
that,
this,
uh,
a
first
lot of this is an audit kind of very early on
Oh, yes,
into
I gotta
the
follow up.
adaptation of
Meet with them,
operations to new
this week,
systems, CPMS
City Hall.
upgrades, use of
We're on.
LexisNexis.
Yeah.
They're kind of short staffed.
today.
We're gonna be asking for staff, review the board meeting, we're gonna be asking for staff. So this is,
With this before
Yeah.
the board meeting.
actually, I consider this pretty good because did we find anyone who didn't get a benefit or got a poor, like a wildly inaccurate benefit other than the recalcs?
No,
That's, yeah, see, a lot of this is administrative and control point. It's not like there weren't benefits distributed. Yeah, so it's like, when I see stuff like, well, we didn't have the EFT information quite perfect in the administrative record. The EFT actually got delivered. The funds got delivered to the right place. It's just we didn't have a good record in the files, so. So not that it's not important, that's important today, it's important, but it's like if the money got to the beneficiary, that's pretty important.
We're here.
Oh, we really saw it. We
Presentation.
really did saw it.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
We're still cleaning up our controls and administrative records.
Yeah, so we just to catch you up really quickly, so we just went over the death benefits audit. Just really quickly, so there were some recalculations due to change in law, chapter 716. A few of those are still outstanding, but currently in progress. The system has been updated to allow for those recalculations, and they're being done once a month. Target is to scale up to 5 a month. Segregation of duties was missing in some instances due to staff shortages. Some forms, Sandy was just talking about, those were not properly completed but accepted. And there are delays in processing, delays in receiving notifications from beneficiaries and getting back to them, and also in processing. There was an issue with the dispatch letter, so the disbursement letters were not going out, or some letters were dispatched for the packages with inaccurate information. And management did agree with all of those findings and are working on them. Target date is generally between June of this year and June of next year. All right, so next up is just an update on the audits that are currently ongoing. First one is the service credit purchase audit. This is a review of prior service. We actually just reported on this one yesterday, so we'll cover that at the next meeting. We have an audit of TDA contributions. Have an audit of pension benefit payments, and those are the 3 internal audits. We are getting ready to kick off payroll procedures really soon. And then for external, DFS audit, we're still waiting on that report. And then the review that was done by Millman. So this was reported in January, and I'll cover that in the upcoming slides.
Isn't DFS due for another audit soon?
Yes, they are, but
We still haven't seen the report.
just have the draft. Last we heard, they were talking to the actuary.
Yeah.
Did
There's
they
a
ever
lot of drama
finalize the response to the letter?
That I'm not privy to.
I don't think so. No, the last I heard is that Merrick delivered the coup de grace of the BFS actuary. He was actually wrong on a lot of his points.
DFS is actually, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He was not a pension actuary, he was an insurance actuary.
The question, the TDA audit, does that happen at all in conjunction? I think I know the answer to this, with the TRS?
No, separate. All right, so this is just an update on the outstanding findings. So these are some of the implementations that have happened relating to those findings. One of them was due to the enrollment audit that we had middle of last year, I believe. And so now the team has implemented a daily report of demographic changes. So we have identified some discrepancies with the updates to member records. So they're now doing a daily report, and that report is reviewed by the supervisor. There's also now, we also identified,
Daily basis?
there's not that many that are done on a daily basis. So one of the issues we also identified in that audit was an issue with arrears. So the arrears unit wasn't being notified of newly enrolled members that could potentially owe arrears. So now there's a report that's being generated monthly and sent to the arrears unit so that they can review those and process the cases that need to be processed. There was also pen testing conducted on CPMS, on the MSS side of CPMS. This was done in October. And that pen test identified 3 medium severity vulnerabilities. And it was the results of the pen test was shared with Vitech for remediation. And then a process for role changes for deactivation of user accounts was also implemented. And there were some challenges with the security. So we have done an audit where we reviewed the security at 65 Port Street for the employees that were still on the 16th floor, but all of those employees have now been relocated to 55 Wood. And then just in terms of numbers, 6 findings were fully remediated since the last audit committee meeting, and 49 are still outstanding. And from a audit rating perspective, almost 60% of those that were rated high have been fully remediated, and for those that were rated medium, around 66%. And then for those that are still open, 41% of those were rated high and 34% rated medium. So there is progress when it comes to remediation efforts.
Hey, Dave, do you have published stats on when we slide a date for updates?
I track them, but
You track them? Okay.
Is the, just for education purposes, we bandy about the 70% women, 70% people of color as the demographic basis of BERS. Is that accurate?
We have that data. It's usually not audited, but we track that. Do our data
We're gonna
analytics
do a
department.
daily.
The EEPC looks at things like that.
Yeah, we have that data. If you wanna.
Within the context of having, hearing them, getting, we're fixing that every day, we're doing that every day. I'm just curious, the latest numbers were. No big deal. So do we have to approve we're at the approval portion of the,
Not yet. We're getting there.
trying to move it along.
Okay, so this is just a slide showing you some of the open high-risk findings. Just to run through them really quickly. So inaccurate dates of membership for some permanently appointed employees. I know that's actively being worked on because I got an email yesterday. Beneficiary designations were lacking. That's ongoing. We don't have a date for that. Suspension of accounts for members is also being worked on.
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yes.
One of the things I remember us talking about was somebody suspiciously taking over other accounts.
Yep, MSS fraud. Yep.
Yes, so is that still being, is it resolved or are
That
we
is-
still working on that?
It's resolved. The city covered the cost to the members. It was about $1.2 million, I believe, after recovery. The FBI and New York City cybersecurity team did the investigation. They determined there were 2 culprits. One of them's already in jail. The other one will probably get an update in another few months. He's in court.
What are the chances of something like this happening again?
We implemented a mandatory, you have to present yourself in person with federal ID in order to get an MSS account. That's easy for some new members because they're actually visiting our counselors. It makes it difficult on older members, but we're kind of at a loss for confidently identifying someone remotely. We did an RFP for remote ID services. ID.me won. We did that and kind of, you have to understand that the federal government did this about 3 years ago. They choose ID.me, and Social Security abandoned ID.me about a year ago because they found it could be spoofed. So if you apply for Social Security benefits, they'll require you to go through ID.me and then follow that up with, you have to present yourself at a Social Security office with your federal ID in order to get approved. So we're kind of frustrated. Good thing we didn't sign a contract with ID.me because it would have been a couple of $1 million.
So you said you didn't, you're glad you didn't because you said the federal government abandoned them?
Yeah,
Because it wasn't working?
basically, the people at the front edge of cybersecurity risk are saying it isn't sufficient. You can't, because I can be spoofed by an AI graphics chip, and I can present myself to ID.me and they wouldn't know it's you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me ask you something. As it relates to what percent, have we looked to see what percent of people that it's a burden to be physically available to come to New York City? Because I would think that if somebody's retired or
Yeah, they're
sick or disabled, they may not be in New York, and it's it's certainly a hell of a burden. I'm in Florida, God forbid, and something happens, I gotta come back to New York to present myself.
Well, this is only for member self-services online.
Okay,
You can still submit notarized forms through Box.
you can still do it, that's the
Right.
question.
So it's a burden for someone who doesn't have an active MSS account. Like I said, someone who signs up today can walk in the counseling center, prove who they are, and get access immediately. Or actually present themselves here. I don't think anyone ever has, but they could. But you know, it's unfortunately a burden, but I don't know how we eliminate that burden without taking the risk of losing more money. Because the problem with, recall that this fraud was perpetrated by people who could identify retirees, and we have to publish, every time someone retires, the world knows, we publish it. And if there's social security numbers out there, it's easy to spoof.
So let me ask you something. Is there an example of a best practice? What is TRS doing? What is fire doing? What is police doing?
My
How are we
understanding is
different?
that TRS requires present.
Same
Someone to be
thing.
present. Now, we're looking at, we just recently got an interview with Salesforce. Salesforce has a Box interface,
In the face?
and Salesforce will handle the ID confirmation. That's something we will consider. But it's unclear to me that they will be able to have a better ability to confirm than us. And if they're requiring someone to present themselves.
Same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Unless
they're
they have
probably
more,
using,
unless they have more access points
they're
than we
probably
do.
using a TSA access point or a Clear, some other agency, and those people require you to present yourself physically.
But I guess the question would be, if it's about not being in the city and it's potentially about having more access points, that could be a solution
Yes.
if it's required. I just don't know, like, what percent of people actually need that versus.
That's what Salesforce might give us. They may have different access points or
Mhm.
use a post office, right? You can go to
Yeah.
the post office, confirm where you are. We're
Yeah.
looking into that. Matter of fact, the operations team gave me an update on that over the weekend. They're looking at that. That's something that we could put on our CPMS upgrade schedule if we find it's attractive.
All right, so
And again, we happen to have found that because how that
We were
suspicious.
very lucky.
Yeah,
Some woman was watching her accounts
Yeah.
and said, what's this loan? And you know what? It's a good thing because we caught it.
Early
They had taken $1.5 million already
stuff.
and they took it in loans. So it would have taken, I mean, we wouldn't have noticed defaults on loan payments for
20,
maybe
10
a
years
year.
out, you know?
So they could have taken tens of millions of dollars. It's amazing. And we actually were very honest with the other systems. We had a big meeting with the mayor's office and Cyber Command and everyone. We shared it. And TRS and NYCBERS both acknowledged they've had these problems. Yeah, they just don't broadcast it. But they've had these problems.
no, I think they appreciate, like, going to fiduciary training in the last couple of weeks, we've had 3 of them.
Yeah.
I think that they appreciate when we have these conversations,
Yeah.
that we're not siloed out of,
Yeah,
Understood.
we went right to the FBI, so, you know, they actually caught the guys.
Good job.
Yeah, good job on them.
Speaking up though, I mean, that's what we
Yeah.
tell the kids in school,
Yeah.
like, you gotta speak up, you gotta say something. Sorry,
no, you're good. So segregation of duties is also being worked on pertaining to participant account adjustments and approval of refunds. Overtime for staff is also being reviewed and reconciled. There's also a timekeeping training that's happening tomorrow to help with timekeeping issues. We're still, there's still a contract that needs to be, created and shared with TRS for the variable annuity fund. Yeah, target date for that is December. And then,
They're supposed to send it to us though, right?
it's supposed to be a discussion between legal team.
That is a
Well, it's 5 years, what, 5 years pending?
incredible problem. It's never existed. supposed to be every 5 years.
Supposed to be every 5
I
years.
think
Ever-
it came up, I think, actually at the at one of the last TRS meetings too, so it's on someone's radar, but I didn't see.
Yeah, it's because we've been demanding that we audit it,
Okay.
and they've been rejecting our audit demands. And Dave, that's still an accurate statement, right? They
Yes.
rejected our audit command,
Oh, no, say that again?
they rejected our ability to audit what they do.
We didn't ask to audit them.
Is that well, it hasn't Chitra had those conversations with them?
Possibly, we did request information from them.
Yeah.
They were going to give us something and then kind of fell through.
Yeah, if you look at TRS's financial statement and our financial statement, you would notice that numbers don't agree.
It's usually not a good thing.
That's a bad thing. It's a
Why
bad
don't
thing.
they agree?
We wish we knew.
How far off are they?
Fairly far off. Fairly far off.
And nobody's questioning the variance?
Oh, yeah, we've been questioning it for the last 7 years.
So I'm not
Eight
sure
years,
which
maybe.
numbers we're talking about here. What
The
numbers?
TDA.
TDA, very
Ah.
good TDA.
Yeah.
It's small, it's extraordinarily complicated calculation of NAV. It is not an NAV calculation, it is a contrived legislative calculation of value.
So when you say their report and your report different, are you guys looking at the same customers, I guess? What are we looking at? Why
Yeah,
do they even have it? I don't understand. Is it because somebody transfers from one program to another? What is?
it's just the way the number of shares and the value of shares is calculated.
So they have a TDA and we have a TDA
Yes,
Work together.
and they work together.
yes.
But
They-
our
T-
TDA
T-
return is
TRS
higher.
manages it. Yep,
They manage our TDA too?
our variable TDA.
The
they
variable,
manage.
I got it now.
Yeah.
I got it now.
Yeah.
And you see, what's the payout is what, 8% for some employees, 7% for the other?
That's the,
That's
that's
the-
the other,
fixed.
that's the 403B plan is can be variable, which is equity related, that's managed by TRS.
Okay.
The 403B plan TDA option for
Fixed.
FERS members who are not UFT union is 8.25, and it is pooled with our QPP. For the UFT union members, it's 7%, and it's pooled with our QPP. So.
Easy peasy.
Like we make everything hard.
Actually, I'm not sure BAM understands how it works personally, so. I think we do. At least I can put up
We
a
need to
good,
look into the
I can
hood.
put up a good argument that I do.
Reconciling,
Jesus.
that's not a good thing.
It's not a good
This has
thing.
been an issue for a while.
So when do we address it? And like,
UAL,
Yeah,
that
it-
is based on 7%.
Well, that's.
We've been working on it.
Discount, yes, yeah. It's, yeah.
Working on it.
Okay, no, anyway,
Right, so.
Dave's doing her job, that's it.
So, financial reporting, I know there are activity testing reports in CPMS to facilitate that. Procurement of cloud-based backup is ongoing. Also, a privileged access management solution is being considered. All right, so this is just an update on 3 external audits that took place. So the first one is the audit from the controller of the city of New York that was reported in August of last year. The corrective actions that they gave, there were 6 of them. 3 are completed, 3 are in progress. So for those that are in progress, the first one has to do with an update of the Board of Trustees bylaws, which is currently in final draft stage. There have been recent staff departures that pushed the deadline to, Q3 of this fiscal year. So by the end of June, it should be fully updated and shared with the board. Drafting of procurement policies and procedures specific to BERS is ongoing and also delayed due to staffing. We actually had a new director of procurement start a week ago, about a week ago, week and a half.
2 or 3 weeks.
Did they finish that thing yet?
And then they also recommended that bank recs be performed on a monthly basis. And this was done on a few months back due to staffing as well. And the fiscal ops team plans to have this down to a 2-month lag by the end of this fiscal year.
I just have a quick question about staffing.
Yeah.
Are we short on staffing and there's a plan to ramp up to get the staff? And how far away are we from that? And is that part of the budget?
So, yeah, when we propose the fiscal 2026 budget, we're gonna propose added staff. I think we were gonna propose a multi-year period of ramping staff up. And this is gonna be subject to the board meeting, but one of our challenges is we have to figure out or wait till we know what the implications are of chapter 551. So we have 55,000 members called at December 1st last year. We auto enrolled about 30,000, gets us to 85,000 approximately. I'm rounding a little bit. Maybe it was 29.5 or something like that, about 30,000. And there are 20,000 UFT union members in that 85,000 that have the option to transfer to TRS. So we could be at 65,000 new members versus 55,000, or we could be at 80,000.
Didn't we
And-
talk about modeling this out on,
have
scenario B, scenario C?
It was one of the reasons I shared the data last week. We have 8 years of data on workflow and what the relationship of to members to transactions, timing and numbers. And we're developing a model for each one of the departments.
Yep.
And we actually contracted with Siegel to help us further improve that development. And yes, we will be able to predict. And we will begin scaling in fiscal 2026. So we will likely, there's nothing firm yet. And we're being recorded, aren't we? Yeah, there's nothing firm yet. I'm gonna give you a little bit more in the executive session at the board meeting on this.
And those TRS members have 1 year to make that move?
That's right. We're a quarter through that period already.
Okay.
And we've only had, we watch it on a daily basis, 56 transfers to date. To date. And you know, when I made a conservative estimate that no more than 85% are likely to transfer, and my number is 50, I think I'd revise that down to under 15% will transfer.
Okay, you originally said up to 85 would transfer.
Yeah, that was a most conservative estimate I could come up with.
Oh, and just remind me, what's the benefit? What's the pros and cons? Like why would I go to TRS versus staying here
You get more options in equity investment in the TDA,
in TRS?
in TRS. I think you give up some counseling options because they don't have as many counselors. And there is a risk that you end up in a TRS specialty 55 program where you have to pay
and forth.
back. Yeah,
And then, and is their TDA the 7% return versus the 8.25% return?
but that's the same for, once you're a UFT member, whether you're BERS or TRS,
Same
it's
return.
7%. That's
I
contract
got it.
give up that they gave up like 12
So
years
you get
ago.
less counseling there, but you have more options for investments versus here.
And the feedback we're getting from our counseling center is that a lot of the people are coming in and visiting, say, yeah, I'm retiring in 3 to 5 years, I'm not gonna move. We're getting a lot of that. And specifically, it's a wave of therapists who are moving. Of the 56 occupational therapists, 39, physical therapists, 14. It's the therapists, and we've seen them. We're being recorded, right? So they're less happy with our counseling than other members. I will say that.
I think also this thing, if you're a teacher, you're a UFT member, maybe you want to just inherently be with TRS. But I guess that's
Yeah,
not
they
panning
both-
out that way.
They're UST members and they feel they should be TRS. It's okay.
That to me was, I thought, the driving factor, would be the driving factor, but apparently it's not showing up as of now yet.
Well, they're out there marketing, and I can tell you that 2 weeks ago, we had 30 transfers out. Now we have 56. And
Well, they have
TRS.
till the end of the year.
Yeah, they have till December 10th.
Okay, so,
It's December 10th at midnight to.
and it started when? January?
It started December 10th, 2020.
So you might see an acceleration of people that are running out of time, but right now it's not a landslide, right?
Yeah,
And it's
and-
nothing that's gonna
And you have.
change.
They're marketing aggressively.
UFT.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
So
They need more people?
there's a legislative win. Right?
So as far as actions that have been completed, the controller's office had recommended that BERS develop procedures for its credit card, but the credit card was closed in October of 2022, so nothing had to be done really. And BERS also let them know that there will be no new credit cards until those procedures are in place. They recommended that BERS issue a long distance travel policy, which BERS already did. And that is also currently being reviewed and updated by the new Director of Procurement. And then lastly, the General Counsel approves travel requests from Executive Director and the Deputy Executive Director.
Just, Jay, I want to go back one thing too also, with the 2 month, the reconciliation, the monthly reconciliation being behind. Is it not accurate that there was a de facto daily reconciliation to some extent being done?
Yes.
It wasn't officially being, but it wasn't like it wasn't like we were flying blind on it.
Not yet, not totally.
Exactly.
Um,
Not that
yes.
far on the back.
This is Chitra, Director of Fiscal Operations. Yes, we do daily reconciliation of the bank. We have a staff dedicated just to look at the banking transactions, like on a daily basis. So, what they are referring here is a formal reconciliation statement. We have had staffing shortages. We hope we are able to hire the 2 vacancies that we have very soon. So hopefully this audit finding will be remediated. I really hope by June we should be able to remediate this.
I just wanted that noted for the record, just so people don't think we were flying blind, but
Yeah.
it's
It's an administrative weakness.
right.
All right, so next external audit is the audit by EEPC that was concluded in October of last year. And all of the corrective actions that they handed down have been completed. BERS is just waiting to get that formally in writing. And just to highlight some of the actions that were completed. So there was an annual review of workplace demographics to identify any corrective actions. None were identified. The EEO policy was, the updated EEO policy was posted on the BERS website. The reasonable accommodation forms were updated and distributed across BERS along with the EEO policy. Sandy sent an email affirming BERS's EEO commitment in January of 2024 and January of 2025. Mandatory EEO trainings were completed, and BERS plans to ensure that other related trainings for staff are completed as well. An EEO officer was selected because we had a staff departure, and a new EEO officer was assigned the responsibility of compliance with the disability laws.
And it's an interim position. We expect to have a senior executive added to staff in the next couple of weeks, and that will be an EEO officer, and we'll have no direct reports.
And then lastly, a new career counselor was designated based on staff departure as well.
But Dave, we haven't gotten a letter from the EEPC closing that audit?
Not yet. So Lydia got an email just indicating that the
Just
letter
email,
was
okay.
coming. Yeah.
Since I thought I saw, okay, thanks.
And then lastly, the minimum review. So this was part 2. Part 1 focused on the administrative controls in place from a high level. And part 2 focused on the validity of the data provided to the actuary that the actuary uses for its benefits calculations. So they compared that data with the data that was used in benefit calculations for consistency. Now, the data elements were reviewed and graded either as reasonable, potential additional review required, or recommended. So based on the 20 samples of benefits that they reviewed for BERS, they came up with 3 categories. So for active data, 25% of the samples were marked either potential or recommended additional review. For retiree data, 5% were marked for potential additional review. And then for benefit calculations, 5% of samples were marked for potential additional review. All other data points were marked as reasonable for BERS.
Yeah, if you look at the report in the packet, you can see a comparison of how we did versus the other systems. I'm actually pleasantly surprised how well we did. If I were.
And just to point out, the ops team also did a good job because they had given us a list of potential issues or questions with each sample. And so the ops team went in, reviewed each sample and gave them comments to clear those up. And some of the discrepancies are due to timing. So a member might have, let's say, 10 years at the time that that data is sent to the actuary. And if they retire 2 years later, they're going to have 2 years. 2 more years and have 12 years. So those sort of discrepancies were also. All right, so this is just annual reporting that's required by the IIA standards from internal audit to the audit committee. And the first one is just to affirm our conformance with the standards. And just a statement to let you know that our audit procedures are performed in conformance with the mandatory elements of the International Professional Practices Framework, which are the standards and the Code of Ethics. That being said, those standards have now been updated, and the updated standards went into effect in January of this year. And we are actively working to implement that across our processes. And one of the results of that is the updated internal audit charter that you will be hopefully approving today.
Gatsby is no longer a thing, right?
It is a thing.
It is, of
for
course
accounting.
it is. I retract, Gatsby is such a thing.
And then the other statement would be to confirm the internal audit's function independence. We are functioning independently at BERS, and that's affirmed by the dual reporting structure and positioning of the internal audit function. So we report functionally to you, the audit committee, and administratively to the executive office. And there have been no scope limitations or restrictions on access to records or BERS personnel or to resources. And then lastly, we have something called a QAIP. So that's our Quality Assurance and Improvement Program. There are 2 main components to this program. It's the external assessment and the internal assessment. So the external assessment is required once every 5 years. Our audit team is about just over 5 years old. We started the procurement process to get that external assessment done last year. But things have been sort of delayed, and we are currently in the final stages of reviewing RFQs or proposals to select a vendor to do that assessment. And then pertaining to the internal assessment, that's ongoing. And what we've noted from our internal assessments is that our audits are taking longer than we would like. So last year, it took us between 183 days and 588 days to complete audits. Some of that is due to timing in receiving documents, the complexity of the audit, but we're actively working to bring down those timelines. We also currently have 2 open headcounts that we're recruiting for. Hopefully we can onboard someone as soon as possible in April. Galaxy, the system being used for staffing, shuts down this time every year. So it's impacting our timeline for onboarding that person. And then we are considering 2 other candidates to fill the second vacancy. We also have the need for an IT auditor, and we are in the early stages of procuring a third-party firm to help with our IT audits. We also need a software solution for audit management, and we're in the early stages of procurement. Now, we did start both procurements last year, but there's been delays due to staffing. The procurement team was down to 1 person at some point, and so we're moving that along as best we can. So are there any questions regarding this? All right, so this is the last slide. We're almost there. So We usually will do a risk assessment every year. The last risk assessment was done in the fall of last year to plan the activities for this year. And we have these 8 categories of high risk areas for BERS that we identified. There aren't significant changes from last year, but we just kind of reordered some of those priorities based on thought leaders in the industry, the IIA's assessment of, they usually will do a survey every year, a global survey of audit executives, and they'll give us a report on what's on the mind of these executives as far as risks that the organization should be looking at. So we have these 8 categories for cybersecurity, systems and data integrity, disbursements and benefit payments, investments, human resources or human capital, and then the governance of BERS as a whole. And then we have the perspective of the member and their experience with BERS, and the compliance factor that is always a constant. There are several laws that BERS has to comply with, so that's always top of mind. And then based on these areas, we've identified the areas of focus, right, for our audits in 2025. So we have these 7 audits. We're cautiously ambitious due to timing, staffing shortages. There could be some adjustment to the timing of these audits, but this is what we've planned to conduct this year. If there are any questions regarding this, I'll be happy to take them. So a more comprehensive report on the risk assessment and the audit plan is available in your packets and was included in SharePoint. And right after this, we'll be asking for an approval.
So, is any of this, like, what is this is recurring annually, and what if this is like new to the assessment and general audit?
So these categories are the same from last year. However, within each category, I have a much larger document that has sub-processes. And one of the things that jumps out as in my head right now is under benefits payments. So chapter 551 that Sandy referenced earlier is new. It relates to transfers.
Which one is that?
So it's under disbursements. You don't have the details here. The details are in the audit report itself. I mean, in the internal audit plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's chapter 551 is listed as one of the new, as one of the areas for consideration, and it's new. So if you look at page 2 of the internal audit plan, it's that one.
I guess I just want to understand what is new versus what is a continuation from previous year. And if it's a continuation from previous year, are we making progress?
Yes, so what this is the areas that we've identified, and then based on the processes that fall under these areas, we develop an audit plan for 3 years.
Okay.
And the audit plan is rolling, right? So the high risk processes in here are being covered systematically over
3
a
years.
period of time, yes.
Someone
Yeah, you've been here about 2.5 years?
At BERS?
Yeah.
20 years.
Oh, that's it? Okay, good.
All right, so that concludes my presentation.
Yes, so the next item on the agenda is agenda item 5, which is approval of the internal audit plan. I've been reading it every night, over and over again, and they've done a really good job. I haven't found anything to add. I will entertain a motion to consider.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Mike, who's taking those? Someone, I'm sure some. Okay, so the 3-year rolling internal audit plan presented to us contains planned audits for calendar years 2025, 26, and 27. Any material changes to the planned activities and/or resources for the department may result in revisions to the plan. Significant changes will be communicated to the audit committee and senior management by internal audit director. Is there any questions about this? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item 6, approval of the internal audit charter. Can I have a motion to consider?
Motion.
Second? Margie? And I have to read faster. The internal audit charter was updated and reorganized to align with the global internal audit standards, which went into effect in January 2025. Updates to the charter include citation of the regulation that requires BERS to have an internal audit function, and an outline of the internal audit director's responsibilities relating to ethics and professionalism, objectivity, managing the internal audit function, communication with the audit committee and senior management, and the quality assurance and improvement program. The updated charter also outlines the scope and types of internal audit services provided. Are there any questions about that? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Committee discussion. The next item on the agenda is committee discussion. Can I have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, are there any issues regarding what was discussed here today that need to be discussed further? Does anyone have any additional questions?
I just kind of want to know how things have been going since October, since we've taken on, how many direct deposits do we have now? 29,500 additional?
30,000.
30,000.
So the advantage we have in auto enrollment is that the impact is significantly delayed, right? So it's immediate payroll impact, so we're processing more payrolls and therefore quality assurance is doing more to make sure that payroll data is correct. But they don't qualify for loans for a year. SCP is not we're not hounding people about SCP yet. We've launched outreach to get beneficiaries for these auto enrolled people, but the pressure begins to build, call it December 2025. Right, so that's, then they will have been in the membership for a year. They will have accumulated some contributions. Most of them won't be large, so the loans, they'll start ramping up, but it'll take a few years. So when we present to the board the fiscal 2026 budget, you'll see some forecasts of needs for headcount spread over a period of years. Because it doesn't slam us with 30,000 new members. It takes a while to build.
Just an edification question. Of our employees, how many do take loans? What percentage would you say?
Staff?
Oh, no, of our members.
Oh, that's a good question. We do have that data. A lot. I mean, I can get you the
And I
specific
wonder
data.
I wonder if that's higher here than it would be in the other pension
I suspect it might be because the majority of our members are part-time
and lower pay.
and lower pay.
Okay, well, to say on my script that my term of office as chair is coming to a rapid end, and we, after one meeting, we.
A glorious end.
Yeah, so there'll be a discussion, that'll be probably for the next meeting, which
It aren't those positions voted on during the full board?
No, as for the audit committee chair.
For the chair, it's the committee, but the creation of the committee, yes.
Okay.
And that will be
And I.
at
Next
Floor.
yeah.
considering that this is the first meeting that we had, my only meeting.
All the committees get
It's
restaffed.
canceled.
No, we've had a couple.
But I only took over and then,
This is probably your.
I think we took over because we had a departure. That's why I was filling out the rest.
That's why, okay, I was gonna say, we've met more than once this year, please don't say that on the record.
And the audit committee gets restaffed every 2 years.
It was a long year.
Audit committee gets restaffed every 2 years.
Every 2 years, yeah. So this tenure ends in December.
And all the other
You're
committees
still-
are
still-
reset
yeah.
every year.
Is the chair reset every year?
The chair is every year.
Every year.
Well,
Just to keep in mind.
I didn't get to use my gavel yet. I didn't, you
Keep
trying to get rid of me, Daniel? Okay, anyway, that,
Actually, we're gonna require that you recruit your replacement.
uh, that concludes the agenda for this meeting. The next meeting of the Audit Committee of the Borough's Board of Trustees will be scheduled for the second quarter of 2025 and communicated to all committee members and invitees. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned.
Thank you. Turn the recording off.